Hello, welcome to the next keynote. Today here we welcome Miguel, Barreda, Angeles. I don't try to say it in Spanish. Somebody tried to tell me how to tell it in Spanish, but it's too complicated. Angeles. So, Miguel, you're a doctor in social communication from the University of Barcelona, and you got that degree in 2014, and you worked on television attention and television reception. Then you work in the academia for a few years, mainly on media psychology and HCI, studying the impact of immersive technology on users and society, first in Barcelona, then in Amsterdam, in two universities. And you focused in social interaction in VR, and I remarked that it was during COVID time. So I think it was interesting to do that kind of research at that time, so maybe you can have a word about that. And then you moved to industry in Barcelona again. You're in the editorial boards of the journals Media Psychology and Virtual Reality, and 1 year ago you joined the European Commission as the scientific project leader of the Virtus project, on virtual worlds and society. And that is the way I learned that there were scientific projects and researchers at the European Commission, and that may be the way you just learned it. So you're going to talk about to us about this project and from the policy perspective. So you can explain us what this project is about, what you are doing, what it is, and also maybe what it means to be a researcher at the European Commission. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Yannick, for the nice introduction. Can you hear me? Yeah. I hope I can answer all these questions. But before, I would like to say thank you to the organizers, Mel, Aurelio, and all the organizing team for putting together this, and for inviting me, of course, and for putting together this fantastic initiative. I think it really shows how lively and vibrant is the research on this area. In my presentation, I would like to stress a bit how relevant is the research on the metaverse, not only from the scientific perspective of the technology innovation point of view, but also how important it is to inform public policies on the future of the digital connectivity. I will try to introduce the project that I'm leading in the Joint Research Center of the Commission on virtual worlds and society. I will put the focus particularly on one of the research lines that we have, that is on well-being, and how virtual worlds can impact the well-being of the users. And I will also mention the connections of this research to public policies at the EU level. So, but first of all, let me introduce a little bit about the Joint Research Center, because it's relatively unknown for many people. So we are at the Joint Research Center, or JRC, is a Directorate General within the Commission, so it's organically part of the Commission, but it has a very specific and unique mission within the organization. We don't draft policies, but we do science that can provide independent evidence that can support these policies. The JRC works across the whole policy cycle, from the design to the implementation to the assessment of the policies. And we have groups working in several different fields, from climate change to nuclear safety to food safety, cybersecurity, digital transformation, sustainable economy, social sciences. So every topic that is somehow related to the policies that the Commission is where the Commission has competencies. So. It's a large organization. We are 2,700 people working there, so it's quite large. The sites are spread in 5 different countries. We have one of the sites is here in Seville. And but my project and myself, we are based on, or the project I'm presenting today is based in Ispra, in Italy, in the north of Italy, very close to the Swiss border. So to start talking about the project, first of all, I would like to explain a bit the motivation of this project, and also to start, I would like to make it clear that it's about virtual worlds, and we are understanding this technology in a quite broad sense, of this family of technologies, let's say, in a quite broad sense. So we are not only including immersive technologies or VR, but also any digital environment that provides some representation of a space where people can interact with others and do different things. This is more or less the definition that we are using. We know that this type of technologies started since the very origins of the internet. Already in the late 70s, we have these multi-user dungeons and similar applications. But it's only in the around 2020, 21 when well, as you know, all these different technologies reach maturity, immersive technologies, but also blockchains, also better connectivity, 5G networks. And this is when the policymakers start saying, okay, this is really important. We really need to understand what are the implications of this. And in response to that, to those questions from the policymakers, the JRC produced a report that was published in 2023. The title was Next Generation Virtual Worlds, and the leading author was Isabel Upon Torres. In this report, they provide a quite exhaustive, I would say, overview of opportunities and risks of virtual world technologies across different sectors, from manufacturing to education to public services. Some of them are very clearly connected to some of the presentations that we had here today. And they were stressing particularly the challenges that these virtual worlds can bring, not only technological challenges, but also challenges in terms of societal challenges, in terms of public policies. It's a very comprehensive report, as I was saying, and if you are curious, you can download it. It's available for free, of course, online. And one thing that was clear in the conclusions of this report is that we need more research to really understand these implications, to understand these challenges. So this was somehow the seed of the project that I'm describing today, the project Virtues, Virtual Worlds and Society. Our aim, put very simply, is to understand the impact of virtual worlds in the EU citizens, in the EU business, in the EU institutions, from a human-centric perspective. So, meaning that we put the focus particularly on the experiences, values, and well-being of the people using these applications. Of course, it's a very ambitious objective, and then we will see that we have to narrow it down to more specific and concrete actions. The project is part of a program within the JRC that is called Center for Advanced Studies. And this program hosts projects that have a very fundamental research character compared to other projects in the JRC that are more closely linked to the needs of the policymakers. So in that sense, in this project, we have more freedom, let's say, to explore, but to have a more exploratory character, and the idea is to build capacity and start answering questions that may become more relevant maybe in the next years. The duration of the project is 3 years. It started already 1 year ago, and these projects typically involve a team of 3 to 4 researchers. It's also important to stress here that this is not the only project on virtual worlds in the JRC. There are other projects in the JRC and also outside the JRC at the Commission level that are exploring other questions, but it's probably the one with a more fundamental research orientation. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we can just ignore the policy context. Actually, we need to take it very much into account, because our final mission is to end up providing recommendations to the policymakers. So I would like to provide a quick overview of some of the policies that are the most relevant from our point of view and from our project, from a research perspective. So the main one is the EU initiative on Web 4.0 and virtual worlds. This is a communication from the Commission that was adopted in 2023. And here the Commission acknowledges the important role that the virtual worlds will play, or they are supposed to play in the Internet of the future, and they stress the need that Europe doesn't lag behind in this technological transition, and also the need to develop technologies in a way that are aligned with the values of the Union. I will come back to this communication, but I would also like to mention other policies. An important one is the political guidelines of the Commission. Well, it's a document that the President proposes before she's elected. And in this document, well, the President stresses the need to understand the impact of social media on well-being. And although virtual worlds are maybe not included in the traditional definition of social media, we will see that many of them are used in a way that is very social. So this is actually also pointing to the relevance of understanding this impact. Outside the Commission, also the Parliament has produced the European Parliament has produced resolutions in this direction, stressing the need to understand the impact of virtual worlds on mental health, stressing the need to explore the addictive design of online services, within which virtual worlds would be an example. And then in the broader policy context is, of course, the Digital Services Act, that many of you probably are very familiar with it. And among the systemic risks that the Digital Services Act defines, there is the risk for well-being. So this is also somehow pushing us to do research on what is the impact of virtual worlds on well-being. So as you can see, at many different levels, the policymakers are very interested in understanding how digital technologies and particularly virtual worlds can impact the well-being of the users. If we zoom in a little bit on the initiative on virtual worlds, well, here you have a summary of the 10 specific actions that are proposed across the 4 domains. The domains, well, I didn't mention it, but they are people and skills, business, government, and governance. Well, what we see here is that there is a lot of interest on boosting the European industry in this area, and there are many of the actions are addressed in that direction. There are also actions in the looking to the standardization and interoperability of the systems. Other are more like trying to explore the use for the public administration. But for us, as researchers, in our project in particular, the one that is particularly relevant is the Action 2, in which the Commission commits to support research on health and well-being on the impact of virtual worlds on health and well-being, particularly in the case of children. Well, not surprisingly, no? So this is already somehow putting some boundaries on what are the type of applications, the technologies that we will include in our research. Well, then once that we have the kind of the policy context clear, I can start talking a bit about the content of the project. And the starting point is trying to identify what is the object of a study of the project. What is the meaning of virtual worlds? What are virtual worlds? In that sense, we are lucky because the Commission provided a kind of a formal definition that we can use. Virtual worlds are defined as persistent, immersive environments based on technologies including 3D and extended reality that make possible to blend physical and digital worlds in real time for several purposes, from learning to socializing to making simulations and so on. So it's a good starting point to have a definition, but at the same time, if you read it, it's clear that it's a very open and very broad definition, and maybe many of the elements that are within the definition can actually be understood in different ways. So it's not really, as a researcher, when you need to define a study to understand the impact of this on well-being, you still have a problem of say, okay, but what is this? So I wouldn't say probably the challenge of the definition is still, it gets even more complicated, because if we look at the literature on the metaverse and the impact of metaverse on well-being, well, again, there is no agreement on a single definition of the metaverse. For some authors, like Matthew Ball or the ITU group on the metaverse, they suggest that the metaverse is like a collection of interconnected virtual worlds. That makes sense. For other authors, they just equate the two terms, or they use it in a way that is interchangeably. And other authors directly give up and say, no, there's no definition of the metaverse. The metaverse is a shorthand for several technologies that can be used in group together or not, and that they form ecosystems of users, actors, but no, they don't provide a definition. So we're still are in the same point where we were before, like, okay, what should we study if we want to study the impact of virtual worlds on the well-being, in particularly the well-being of children? So what we try to do to clarify this question is to, well, first of all, to acknowledge that actually the metaverse means different things across different contexts. If we look at this, report by Nokia and Ernst & Young, the authors, make a distinction between three types of contexts, three types of metaverses across different contexts. They speak about the consumer metaverse, which is about environments where users can do things in the same way that they would do it in the real world, but in a digital environment. Then the enterprise metaverse is more about digital collaboration and productivity tools. Then the industrial metaverse, well, it's about the digital representations, digital twins that integrate information from from physical environments into digital systems. So, well, here what we see actually is that we are really talking about very different types of applications when we are talking about the metaverse in different contexts. And also the reason to study there is also different across contexts. If we want to understand the impact of the metaverse in the well-being, or virtual worlds in the well-being of children, probably we should not pay much attention to Siemens digital twins of factories, but we should pay a lot of attention to the applications that children or adults, or at the consumer level, let's say, that have been used today. So, so that includes, for instance, applications like Roblox that maybe it's not the most immersive, but it fits many of the aspects of the definition of a virtual world. Applications like VR chat, like Meta Horizon Worlds, and other applications that allow users to do things within that. Also, the number of users of these applications is also very relevant in some cases. I don't know if anyone has an idea of how many users use Roblox in the EU, according to the data that the company published. Make a guess.
Not I know here.
Huh? No, desk, or even in the phone. So unique users, let's say, that can use it across different platforms. Okay, so there are like 33.8 million users in the EU, which is a lot. It's more than the population of many of the countries in the EU. So, and at the same time, there is almost no research on what people are doing in these platforms or what is going on there. And also, most of these users are kids, so it's even more important to understand that. So, starting from there and having an initial idea of what type of applications we are targeting, we defined three kind of broad objectives of the project. The first one is about we are calling it industrial dimension, but it's actually about the more like the business use of these applications. We want to understand use cases, business models, also the competencies of the users and the creators of content. And regarding more let's say the hard industry use of it, in terms of digital twins, there are other groups working already on that. So here we want to focus on a very underexplored area of research that is the creators economy within VR platforms and within Roblox and within this type of virtual worlds. Second objective is about benefits and risks for individual well-being, and this is the one that is most clearly connected to all the policies that I mentioned before. And we have a third one, which is about broader societal and ethical implications in terms of political participation or representation of minorities. This is a bit, perhaps, the most exotic of the objectives, but we want to point to topics that are now becoming very hot, like use of these platforms for hate speech, for misinformation, and similar topics. You will be surprised if you see the type of content that it is in Roblox sometimes, about far-right content. There are things that are quite surprising and totally underexplored. But for now, we'll focus on the second objective. That is the one that we have a bit more developed so far. Okay, so when talking about the digital virtual worlds and well-being, this, of course, is not a topic that is floating in a void, but there is a long tradition of research on digital media and well-being of the users. And the relationship between this type of research and policy making. So here I'm following the view from Amy Orben in a very nice article from 2020. So we look at what happened every time that a digital media technology became popular, television, video games, social media. What we see is that there's a pattern that tends to repeat, and it's, okay, the technology becomes popular, people start adopting it, then there are concerns that we see in the media or by experts about the potential negative impacts, particularly in kids, but in general. And then, well, the society and the politicians start asking researchers to provide answers, to provide evidence that can inform policies that can tackle those concerns. But the problem is that the adoption of the technology usually goes much faster than the ability of the scientists to provide good answers. And the scientists, in the rush to provide the answers on time, they tend to oversimplify how the impacts of the technology work on people. There are two questions that Orben mentions here. One is technological determinism, that is kind of neglecting that the impact of the technology has to do a lot with the context and how it is used, and not only with the technology itself. And the other one is dose response approaches, like equating a bit the impact of the technology with the impact of a drug, in which you have an impact that is more or less the same for everyone and depends on the level of exposure, like the dose. And we see a lot of research that has followed this type of approaches in social media, for instance. So yeah, the problem is that the reality is much more complex than this, and this with research in this line tend to not to produce very good results, and that cannot inform policy in an effective way. So when analyzing the impact of virtual worlds on society, we need to take this into account. And one way that's been proposed by several authors working in this area, more in digital technology in general, not specifically in virtual worlds, is to be aware of the levels of complexity of the problem that we are addressing. And that complexity comes on one side, on the side of the technology, but also on the side of the outcomes of interest. So on the side of the technology, if we talk about immersive virtual worlds, for instance, we can put the focus on what is the impact of using a headset, but we can put the focus on what is the impact of using a certain type of application, social VR, against other types of application, or against not using it, or against being outside with your friends in the street, in the park. We can put the focus on specific applications or in features of these applications. What is the impact of having a protective bubble within VR versus not having it? But there are even more levels that are more related to how the technology is used, with you or with whom the user is interacting, or what is the content of this interaction. And these levels are probably key to explain the impact of the technology. On the other side, on the side of the outcomes of interest, and here I'm like narrowing down only in terms of mental well-being, let's say. Well, we see that has been researched from many different perspectives, some of them from a more psychopathological perspective, focusing on variables like depression, anxiety. Other researchers went for a more, let's say, broader understanding of psychological well-being, where they include aspects like life satisfaction, having meaningful experiences online. There is a lot of research on problematic use on virtual worlds in general, which includes addiction, but also can refer maybe to harassment and this type of topics, and also researchers that explore like other factors, risk or resilience factors, the impact of loneliness, or how, social capital, social support, all these type of questions, among others. So what we see from here is that the field of research here is very heterogeneous, and it's very, very complex, and there are many different potential perspectives. So what we have been doing in the project so far is to try to put somehow some order, or at least to map this research field. And we have been doing, to do so, we have been doing a scoping review with a focus on virtual worlds and mental health only, but defined in a broad sense, so including all these variables here in the right. And yeah, focusing on virtual worlds, also defined in the way that I defined them before, like immersive environments, digital environments that can be more or less immersive, and within which the users can do activities and interact with others and do different things. So we reviewed we screened a lot of articles, but we see 9,000 articles here. This is because Scopus is because some of the keywords that we were using are very broad, and Scopus is not very good, screening what we wanted. But then the articles that were manually screened were around 900, and then we selected a bit less than 200 articles to include them in the review. And I can offer some of the preliminary results because we haven't finished the analysis of this. Well, the first thing that we see about the structure of the field is that there are, based on keywords, we can find 5 clusters of studies. On the right side, we see 2 bigger clusters that include probably the kind of older literature. That's why also there are more studies. And on the one hand, we have the blue one that is about online games, virtual worlds, and includes concepts like social capital, psychological needs, self-determination theory. So we interpret this as kind of foundational research on platforms like Second Life and trying to understand the social and psychosocial use or impact of these platforms. Then we have the orange cluster that is closely related to this one, that focus on massive multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft is probably the one that is better represented in this group, and that has a strong focus on problematic use, on gaming disorder, addiction, this type of questions. And then on the left we see 3 clusters. A very unique one, I would say, is the red one that is about like Pokemon Go, location-based games, and variables like life satisfaction, mental health, and interestingly COVID-19. So we still need to keep analyzing this, but we understand that this cluster is exploring the effect of using location-based games during the pandemic as a way to kind of deal with the lockdowns and all the issues that it brought to people. And then we have 2 smaller clusters that are probably including the most recent literature on this. The purple one is about social VR and avatars and harassment and presence, so probably it's exploring the embodied experiences of harassment in social VR platforms. And then the green one that is actually very connected, they are very, very close. Includes terms like metaverse, virtual reality, social support, loneliness. So we understand that this is about the use of the metaverse for socialization and social support. So this analysis provides at least some hints on the narratives that the researchers are using, on the different ways of conceptualize what well-being means in virtual worlds. Then if we move to the second question, how researchers are conceptualizing their variables and what methods they're using, what we see is that the main focus is on technology and much less focus on how it is used based on the type of variables that the researchers use. The variables related to mental health, we see balance between the different approaches. The dominant one actually is on psychological well-being, but there is a lot of research on problematic use. Also on resilience factors, particularly social capital, has been explored a lot in platforms like, in older platforms like Second Life and all that. And there is also some research on psychopathological variables. Regarding the methods, most of the research is quantitative, but there is a significant, around 30% of research that includes qualitative methods or mixed methods. And within that is telling the story that, okay, the researchers are still figuring out what are the relevant variables, what are the relevant factors before they can measure them. And among the quantitative studies, we see a lot of cross-sectional designs that cannot provide causal evidence in a consistent or solid way, and other like longitudinal studies or experimental or quasi-experimental studies are a minority here, and there are many examples of studies that actually are conducted with a quite small sample. So yeah, the type of evidence that they can provide is still perhaps not good enough to start informing policies. Regarding the samples, a lot of focus on Western samples and a lot of focus on male users. So we found that in many studies, females are not not particularly well represented. That probably is related to that many studies focus on gaming platforms where there are probably more male users than female, but still we have the feeling that the representation of female users is not totally good. And these are the results that we have for now in this area. So where to go next? We want to try to follow the proposal that is in this article by Karen Mansfield. That is very interesting if you are interested on how research can inform policies in this area. They propose this cycle of steps from research to policy. And we more or less, we are getting a lot of inspiration from there, let's say. So the next steps for us is try to identify what are the unique uses and the relevant populations of users. Of course, we already mentioned that female users, for instance, are not well represented, and we know that they are particularly more often victims of harassment online. But we need to start understanding better what are the vulnerable users and in which type of activities they are involved. So for that, we need to rely on qualitative research, on observational research, on also ethnographic research, perhaps, not only use quantitative designs. And to do that properly, probably we need to really go for a strong involvement of the stakeholders, including the users, if they are minors, also the parents, the industry, the designers, and the practitioners, and so on. Once that we have a clear understanding of that, probably we should move to quantitative research using causal designs. Probably experimental designs in this context can be a bit difficult to implement, but longitudinal designs can provide more or less causal insights with some caution when using them, but probably is the our option. We still need to think about that. And one important part here will be the collaborations with industry and how to get access to better data, because so far the access to the data of use that the researchers have is quite limited, and many researchers in this area are complaining that the data should be, that they should have better access to data. So collaborations with industry are one way to do it. There are other proposals about data donation frameworks that are also quite provocative, let's say. And after that, the next step would be to work on the design and assessment of interventions that probably should go in three lines. One is content moderation needs. Second one is how to design and implement safe by design approaches in collaboration with the industry. And the third one, of course, is the education, not only of the users, but also of those designing content and creating content that, based on some research, are not always aware of the risk that the products can provide. Of course, this is very ambitious, and it's not going to happen within the lifetime of the project. We already know that. But our goal is to start exploring how to set some foundations for these different activities that can be taking on later in other projects or implemented through different types of projects. And yeah, that's all from my side. I would also like to acknowledge that this is not obviously not an individual project. I have we are in a team. It includes my colleagues Simone Amendola, Claudia Silva, Tatiana Somia, that are doing a great effort and a great job on this. And of course, we also have collaborations with external partners, and we have some budget for that and some formulas. So if you have an idea or want to know more about the project or want to discuss anything, feel free to reach out, and our doors are open to talk about this. Thank you very much. And
it's working. Thank you for the nice presentation. Just a little question. The three persons you work with, what are their disciplines?
Say it again?
What are the disciplines, the scientific disciplines of these two persons?
Yes, Simone is a clinical psychologist, and he's been working on this type of research from a clinical perspective, let's say. Claudia is a digital ethnographer, more, I don't know how to define it, but ethnography in the digital world, let's say. And Tatiana has a more like innovation and economics background.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or remarks? Yeah.
Yes, I have a kind of a general question and a more specific one. The first one refers to, well, actually one of the things that I had in mind has already been answered, because you have mentioned that your work also includes a kind of outsourcing part of that research to academia.
Yeah.
So that might be quite interesting for some of us. The second question that is also general refers to actually how the JRC function. You have mentioned that your research is based on what the European Commission said in that Web 4.0 communication in 2023. So you are based in working in these actions identified by the Commission. But does it necessarily mean that you are focusing in areas where the European Commission has in mind some legislative action? That would be the question. And finally, the specific one actually concerns that research that you have mentioned about protection of minors or protection of children. In my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, not exclusively because I have children, and I'm a little bit worried, but also because I think that the group that is going to benefit the most for XR technologies and virtual worlds are now children. In that sense, I think that in Spain it has happened that we now have a proposal for a law on the protection of minors in digital environment, and it surprised me that the only thing that we have in Europe is a provision in the Digital Service Act that basically is a declaration of intention, but it is nothing compulsory. And in that sense, I think that this is an important research that has to be taken into account. I don't know if you can give me more details about that, and also this is a general question. I would like to know whether there are some projects nowadays, a research project that concerns the protection of minors in the metaverse or in virtual worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for the question. I think there are several questions. I will try to answer them. Okay, I mean, regarding the communication, there are other initiatives of research that are more closely connected to some of the points here that are being now tackled by other colleagues in the JRC. So we are focusing on, you said that we are somehow responding to the request of the policymakers. In our project, this is true for the JRC. For our project, we are kind of the ones that have more freedom compared to other projects because we have this exploratory nature that we want to kind of anticipate questions. So the idea is that there are other people in which the policymakers say, okay, we are interested on this, please provide some research. In our case, we are more kind of anticipating questions and saying to the policymakers, pay attention to this in the future. This is going to be relevant. So I don't know if that answers your question. And the second one was about the initiatives about protecting kids in the metaverse. I mean, in the political guidelines of the Commission, there is the intention to produce an Europe-wide inquiry on the impact of social media and well-being. This will start somehow soon, I think, but yeah, there is nothing official on this, but it's in the political guidelines, so it's going to happen. That also includes cyberbullying and other related concepts, but it doesn't have a specific, as far as I know, and I don't know everything about this, as far as I know, it doesn't include a specific focus on virtual worlds. It's more on social media, but this still needs to be developed, so we don't know how it will look like when it happens. And yeah, today, for instance, I think it was published today or yesterday, the French government also said that they want to do something similar to what the Spanish government mentioned that they want to do. And the Commission replied that this kind of that part is more or less competence of the national governments, the regulation of the age access to so it's also a matter of competence, but I'm not an expert on that. So I don't know, to be honest. And it's something I didn't mention, but we are forced to mention everything I say is on my individual capacity. That is not representing any official point of view of the Commission, of course. So yeah, I don't know, but probably there will be initiatives in that sense because it's included in the guidelines of the President of the Commission. But that's all I can say.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. And I think it's excellent that you've done the scoping review. So a scoping review, you always learn a lot, and you have interpreted the results in a very helpful and clear way. As a result of this scoping review, you have a very good bird's eye view of this research field. So everybody would really benefit if you can say what research should have been done. Not just what research was done, but what research should have been done. And that might help people to think about what research should be done now, going forward. My feeling about this area, personally, is that this is an interesting area because the research tends to be quite reactive. It tends to be research on the latest platform or the latest technology craze. And as researchers, we always like to say we are at the frontier, we are at the vanguard. But in this area, the research is often quite reactive, and I think it would be very useful if you can use your knowledge to indicate to us how our research can become more proactive so that we can be there ready with high-quality research when the problems start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's actually a very good one. In that sense, there is a recent article by Amy Orben from University of Cambridge, and she works on social media, not virtual worlds, but I think the principles that she's defending apply totally in this area. And what she's saying, I fully support it, but the merit is not mine, it's something she wrote, is that we should, she's suggesting that we reformulate a bit exactly what you are saying, how reactive we are, and also the amount of evidence that we want to acting on policies. Like what she's, if I remember well, she's suggesting, okay, for problems that can be very serious, maybe we need less evidence to act on this, and maybe we don't need to accumulate all the evidence on the diagnosis, and we can start investigating on the solutions before we have a clear understanding of the diagnosis, depending on how serious is the problem. If the problem is going to be very serious, then maybe we need to put many resources in parallel to tackle it properly. If the problem is less serious, maybe we can go more sequentially and more like in a slow way. We want to publish these results, and we want to address we want to produce some recommendations for researchers and for funders in this regard. We are working on that. But yeah, but these recommendations probably go in the line of what I was saying at the end, on understanding more specific activities, not using dose response approaches, not be more specific about the effects, and also, well, facilitating collaborations with the industry to obtain data. There are many formulas for that particularly in the case of large platforms. Yeah, so we are going in this line, actually.
Maybe we have time for one more question. I have one question. You say that you want to implicate industry, but industry is mostly US, so what do you want to do?
We are exploring, and we are collaborating with some researchers in Germany who are proposing different ways of collaborating with the industry, with different ways to have access to the industry, to data from the industry. One is like having agreements on collaboration on specific topics, and this is one formula that some people in the UK particularly have been exploring. But there are other formulas that are in place. For instance, in the DSA, one of I think the Article 40 of the DSA, but the problem is that this is only for very large online platforms, but it kind of sets the obligation of the platforms to facilitate data to certain researchers that are kind of previously, probably Aurelio knows more than me about this. And there are also other frameworks that are data donation frameworks that some researchers are using now, which are based on your rights on the GDPR of getting access to your data. So what some researchers are doing is to asking users to request their data and to obtain them from the platforms using the right in the GDPR, and then the researchers provide like a pipeline to anonymize and make sure that all the process is safe for the users. And there is a super interesting study on the German elections and content on TikTok that was used following this approach from Jacob Omme is one of the authors, and I can only recommend it because it's very thought-provoking, let's say.
Okay, thank you. I make the relation with the paper of Majbita will present later on ethnography on the metaverse, but it's not only about having the data from the platform, it's also working with the platforms so as to be able to do ethnography within the platform. So it's having tools creating tools with the platforms as well. So that can be very difficult, I think.
Yeah, that I agree. I agree that can be very difficult.
Okay. Thank you very much.